Okay, so get this right. Zendaya, huge star. Like Dune, Euphoria, wins an Emmy, the whole deal.
Right.
But she's recently said some things about fame, and it's got me thinking, we always hear that it's tough being in the spotlight, but this feels different somehow.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like she's challenging that whole idea that you have to be this certain type of person, super outgoing, always on to make it in Hollywood.
Exactly. And the thing is, she's not just saying this in some interview. This was at the New York screening of Dune, Part 2.
Oh, wow. So a big, glamorous event.
Totally. Cameras everywhere. Everyone's excited about the movie. And she uses that moment to talk about how that kind of attention actually terrifies her.
Interesting. What does she actually say?
She said, and I quote, "Often, I am not cut out for that part of it. I do love my job. I'm so grateful. But I am terrified of that part of it. Often."
Terrified. That's a pretty strong word, especially in that kind of setting. It makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes.
Right. Like most celebs, they might say fame is hard, but she's being really upfront about the anxiety it causes her.
It almost makes you think about, like, imposter syndrome, that feeling that you don't belong, even when you're clearly successful.
And maybe that's part of why she's being so open about it. Like she's trying to take back some control in a world where everyone's always watching her.
I could see that. It's
Yeah.
like if she names the fear, maybe it has less power over her.
Totally. Plus, one of the articles mentioned how she was actually a pretty shy kid growing up.
Really? You'd never guess that from her public persona.
Right. And it even said that she uses fashion as a kind of, like, armor to cope with always being on.
Fashion as armor. That's a really interesting way to put it.
And it's not like she hasn't grown up in the business.
Yeah.
Started so young.
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer to it, doesn't it? That whole child star to adult actor thing.
It's like you're supposed to just transition seamlessly, always presenting this image of, like, effortless success.
While the whole world watches, yeah. Every awkward phase, every misstep, it's all documented.
Makes you wonder how anyone develops a healthy sense of self in that environment.
It's true. It's like the opposite of how most of us figure things out,
In private, with room to make mistakes. Yeah, exactly.
And then you add in the whole fan culture thing and it gets even more complex.
Especially now with social media. It's like those boundaries just get, like, completely blurred.
Totally. Fans feel this, like, really intense connection, like they know these stars personally.
And that must make it so much harder for someone like Zendaya to figure out where the persona ends and the real person begins,
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what's so striking about how she talks about this. It's like she's really trying to address that tension directly.
Yeah, she keeps using that word terrified. It feels very intentional.
Right. Like it's not just about disliking the attention. It's deeper than that. It's like she's pleading for some understanding, some space to just be herself.
And it's not just her either. The article talked about how Chappell Roan, the singer, has been saying similar things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but the downsides of fame. She's even used the word abusive to describe it.
Wow. Abusive. That's pretty intense. But I guess it speaks to this, like, growing awareness, especially among younger stars.
That fame isn't this, like, magical, consequence-free thing.
Exactly. And that maybe it's okay to want something different, to be successful on your own terms.
Which actually makes me think about her whole thing with fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
The article talked about it as armor, but...
I was just going to say, maybe it's more than that,
Right. Like, if everyone's going to be watching her anyway, she's going to give them something to look at.
Something powerful, deliberate, on her own terms.
Yes, exactly. It's like she's saying, you want a show, I'll give you a show, but it's going to be my show.
And maybe that's how she reclaims some of that control, in a system that tries to dictate so much of her image.
It's kind of wild. When you think about it, like with all these perfectly filtered Instagram posts, it's easy to forget there's a whole person behind those images,
No, absolutely. We see these curated snapshots and we build up this whole idea of who these celebrities are.
And then Zendaya comes along and reminds us that even the most successful people, they still have these, like, very human struggles.
Exactly. And that's something I think gets lost a lot, especially in these conversations about fame. She's not complaining about success. It's not like she's saying, oh, woe is me, I wish I wasn't famous.
Seem more nuanced than that.
Right, exactly. It's like she's trying to draw this distinction between loving her work, which she clearly does.
Both articles really highlighted that.
Yeah, she's passionate about acting. But it's this other side of fame, that constant pressure to be on, that's really tough for her.
It makes me think of that quote, I think it was Somerset Maugham. He said something like, if you refuse to accept anything but the best, you very often get it.
Oh, I like that.
But it makes you wonder about the cost. right?
Right.
Like, Zendaya's achieved this incredible level of success, but it's clearly come with some, like, unexpected baggage.
And that's a really important conversation to be having, especially now. It's like, can we redefine success? So it's not just about external validation, but also about, like, mental well-being, setting boundaries, staying true to yourself.
Totally. And honestly, the fact that Zendaya is even talking about this, it feels like a step in the right direction.
Right. It's refreshing. She's not trying to pretend she has it all figured out. She's being real about the struggles, the insecurities, even when it might not fit that, like, picture-perfect image.
Exactly. So I guess the big question is, what happens now? Does this mark a real change in how we, as a culture, view celebrities?
It's hard to say. I mean, social media isn't going away anytime soon. But maybe, just maybe, this kind of honesty will become the new norm.
And we'll start to see those perfectly curated personas as just one part of a much more complex picture.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to leave it for today. This whole conversation about Zendaya, it really makes you think about fame in a whole new light, doesn't it?
It really does. It'll be interesting to see where things go from here.
Thanks so much for diving into all this with me. It's been great having you on.
Anytime. Always a pleasure talking about this stuff with you.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.